Now they're going to punt.
I mean, this is playing for the tie. A tie is better than a loss. The fans here are not going to like it.
And welcome to another episode of the Turn Up For What podcast, talking your Houston Texans straight from the Great British Isles. And we're back to talk week one after 145 episodes. It took 20 years for the Texans to finally come out with a tie in a team that, or two teams that desperately trying to lose the game and throw it away. But this week, join us, we've got a first time guest from Radio 610, Mr. Ron the Show Hughley. Ron, how you doing?
I'm good, man. And you spoke about it, boy. That was, nobody wanted that game yesterday. I mean, the amount of mistakes, especially the Colts, the amount of mistakes they made, and then the Texans tried to match them in the fourth quarter. But that one was just a tough one. It was like, man, somebody win it.
Yeah, because I mean, if you think, I wrote them all down there just when I was watching the game back this morning. You had like Alex Pierce dropped in the end zone. They played some wildcat with Nyheim Hines instead of Jonathan Taylor. Jerry Hughes gets an interception, sets up 7. They botched the 2-minute field goal drive in a 2-minute situation. They fumbled the snap 3 times. Then another drop in the end zone in the fourth quarter, and 2 big flags on Moore, the nickel back for them. And Taylor ran out of field or out of bounds off the field, short of the third down late in the game. And you've got 2 40-yard starts or 40-yard line starts from Blankenship kicking out of field, and he also missed a 40 something field goal to win it. I don't think the Colts could have done more to give the Texans that game, Ron.
My goodness, yeah, they attempted to like a fumbling kickoffs or punts that they got back a couple of times. I mean, they were pushing the limits of just it was ridiculous, and the way that it felt was like, hey, this feels like a Lovie Smith special. You all just keep making mistakes, and we'll just sit here and win and let you beat yourself, and we'll just coast ourselves to a win. And that's what it felt like it was going to be until the fourth quarter happened, and the Texans joined in the party.
Yeah. We'll come back to Lovie and some of his calls, but just firstly, Ron, what was it like yesterday? I take it you were in the stadium. What was the atmosphere like? What was the buzz around the place, and was it different from last year?
Oh God, come on, man. Listen, I could just tell you straight from the experience of like driving in last year, especially after like week 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Like driving in, man, it is a breeze to get to where my gate that I need to get to the park. And so I said, you know what? Saw the excitement in the preseason. I said, let me take off a little earlier. And yeah, it was a lot of excitement. The walk I had to get to the press box area and seeing fans, and people were ready to go. And it was a lot louder. And there were some Colts fans, but like last year, the Seattle game, like I would have bet money there were more Seahawks fans than Texans fans last year. But the atmosphere was much better as opposed to last year. So they had that going, and people were excited about the team. I'd say for the first time, really in the last couple of years, people had a renewed excitement for the Texans.
Yeah, I was at the game last year against the Jets just after Thanksgiving. Yeah, just exactly. I was laughing when you said that because I just couldn't believe the lack of traffic versus previous trips,
yes.
and just the lack of people at the tailgate as well. So it was a bit of a buzz. It certainly seemed like the organisation done really well, built up some positive equity with the fan base, and no more so than through Lovie Smith. But I think, Ron, yesterday he potentially eroded some of that with the calls. There was a 4th and 2 in the third quarter, didn't go for it, punted when it could have been a 59-yard field goal. I think roughly it was a 42. Yep, so 59-yard field goal when Kaimi's 61 attempt last year was good. There was a 4th and 3 twice, one in the fourth quarter and in overtime, which rang out the boos. It was clear as day on the broadcast. What do you think of Lovie Smith's conservatism in terms of not going for it? And then also, what do you think that's done to his broader reputation?
Listen, I think I hated it, just like I can hear it in your voice. You did. I hate just leaving it out there. I think what it brought to me was during all of this, Lovey, when he got here, commanded respect because of who Lovey Smith is. And I think hiring Lovey Smith, having him be the face instead of Nick Caserio, having him be the guy that people look at as the face of the Texans, immediately brought respect, immediately brought the factor of taking them serious, and they weren't a laughing stock anymore. And so much so, Lovey, just listening to him, to the two coaches previous before him, especially over Hughley, who just wasn't fit for the job, just didn't have enough experience for the job. When you heard him and you hear him, and it was like, wow, like you got a real head coach. You felt good about your situation, your head coach. And man, I think it blinded us from why people weren't giving Lovey Smith jobs. It made us forget why it is that Lovey Smith frustrates the hell out of fan bases that he was the head coach of. And we got to see it all over the fourth quarter and overtime. His conservative nature has always been something that frustrated fans in Chicago, his short term in Tampa. That has been him. He was happy with Rex Grossman as his quarterback to get him. Like he wanted to win. Like he is a guy. He won't say it out loud. He is a guy. Hey man, let's punt this sucker. I'm fine with it, man. We got a lead. Let's punt. Let's just keep playing. We got to see what it is that frustrated him. We got to see the ceiling that he has had in the past, and that is, I'm gonna play on my defense. I'm gonna do what it says in the book. And when I say the book from like 1993, and that's what I'm gonna do. And we forgot, with all of the respect he gave us and how he made you feel about being a Texan, and that you got a real coach over what you had before. He's very, very likable. But yesterday in the fourth quarter and overtime, we got a chance to remember, oh yeah, that's why people weren't knocking down the doors to hire Lovey Smith, because there's a ceiling there.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, I suppose with the broader context that he was hired in, he's going to get next year. So, like, I think, people are going to have to get used to this in a sense. But yeah, I think it kind of gave a real sense of a ceiling, I think. And I think a lot of people have been really positive about it, similarly in the way they have been with Pep Hamilton over the off-season. But I thought at times there was the offensive play calling for me, Ron, yesterday. There was at least 3 second and mediums to long distances that they ran the ball with Rex Burkhead. And I think the play call to go for it on third down, trying to put a heavy personnel set, jumbo package, whatever you want to call it, on the field, and try and beat that Colts defensive line, which gave guys like Titus Howard, Tunsil, all they could handle all day. And I don't think any of them covered themselves in glory, but I thought the play calling plus the lack of kind of being able to establish himself up front against their defense, I think was quite a concern.
Yeah, and I think it's not a coincidence that in that time of the game, the creativity was shut off. Right, you open up the half with the flea flicker. By the way, we'll get to Davis Mills, I'm sure, at some point. Davis Mills, that's got to be a walk-in touchdown. I mean, you can't have a guy having to stop and fair catch it to catch it. But like, we're seeing flea flickers right off the bat. We're seeing creativity. I think what they did to get OJ Howard open on a couple of occasions, you saw them scheme stuff. He schemed things. Then it became, nah, man, we're not going to have Damian Pearson, the guy who gives us the best chance to make a play, even if it's blocked well. We're going to have Rex in because I trust Rex, and I know exactly what I'm going to get from Rex, and I don't think he's going to fumble. Right? Like, it was just, let's just run it into, let's not play action. Let's not go play action on one of these first downs to try to get something. Let's not come down the field on one of these. It was, hey, let's be smart. And let's understand we're not going to lose the game, and that's what it was.
Yeah, just go back to that creativity point. I think like you said, I think on the second OG Howard touchdown, there was some great pre-snap motion.
Absolutely,
Brevin lined up as a fullback, motioned out. Somebody else motioned to the other side. and everybody was focused on all those guys moving. And for the second time, almost identically in the day, O.J. Howard guts them up the seam. It's going to be holes in a defense like that Gus Bradley runs. And it was, two really easy scores. Now, but beyond that, I think, that's probably the concern. I think, first of all, Ron, the run game again let us down. And actually, schematically, obviously the all-22 is not out yet, but certainly in terms of organisation, in terms of structure of the offence, in terms of the running game, was good. But I lost count how many times Rex Burkhead ran into the back of people, wasn't patient enough, didn't see the hole, and you've got Dameon Pierce on the sideline. I think the running game was one of the things that this team has to have this year for things to go right, or even semi-okay, and it just wasn't there yesterday.
I mean, you said it, right? Like, we were sold a bill of goods that Dameon Pierce was the guy, and we watched him in the preseason. I watched him at training camp almost every day, that he should have been the guy. He should be the guy. He's a starting running back is what Lovey said. He's earned it. And then we came down to it, and Rex Burkhead is getting, 19 carries. Rex Burkhead has, almost 20 touches, and he has like 10. Rex Burkhead is doubling the amount of touches. And there's an absolute ceiling to Rex. He's a solid player. But Dameon Pierce, as we saw, gives you the best chance to get yards in the run game, because it doesn't have to be blocked perfectly. His vision has been fantastic all the way up to this point. And when you give Rex Burkhead that many more opportunities, especially late, and basically, I know you saw it, Dameon Pierce just became a guy who spelled Rex. Like that's what it was. We thought it was going to be the opposite. He just came in, spelled him. There are a couple of times we're in the press box. We're like, is Pierce hurt? Is there an injury or something? And no, and I can remember seeing him from my spot in the press box at the end of the game. I could see, he almost fired his helmet into the ground. I could see the frustration like all over his body. And I just think that's the biggest thing. I think your O-line has improved. I think George Warhop has improved this offensive line, but you got to give your best guy a shot. Like that's who's got to get the ball most of the time. I think that's the biggest problem to me is you just didn't give your best players the most opportunities to score or to have a chance to run the football.
Yeah, it's all. I suppose it's all linked in with the play call and the play design, as you said. The creativity tap got shut off as things look. As adversity struck, it looked like the options to the offense narrowed, which was not a good thing. But yeah, after that play that Mills tripped Dameon Pierce, that you saw him, Lovey kind of embraced him as he came off on the sidelines. And that was almost the point where they flipped the switch. And I don't know if they just thought, let's take him out this week, let's reduce his carries. I don't know if that was planned, but certainly it's not putting the best talent out there. And I think that's the concern. When you've got these young guys, this season is about development and progress towards becoming competitive. And let's give them credit. They're an 8.5 point underdog. They covered that with aplomb, did really well. You get a tie in a game you probably should have won when you're 17 points up with 10 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. But I think the whole offense, the lack of running game, the lack of using your best players is going to really irk some people, I think, Ron.
That's a frustration, right? Like, yeah, there were some good things done yesterday. But we got to be honest. The Colts did everything they could to lose the game. The focus, whatever. But if they're going to do that, you got to take it. You can't be up 17 in the fourth quarter, or even worse, as you said, 10 minutes left, and lose that game. And it really doesn't sit well with, all right, you're up 17 points. The thing you want to do, man, let's try to run the ball. Let's run. We're going to run the ball, try to run this clock out. And you got a kid who has been the best without a shadow of a doubt on your team. Dameon Pierce by the fourth quarter, pounding and running as hard as he does and getting yards. Like, you could salt this game away the way you want to. And nope. We trust Rex. And that's the part that's infuriating, I think, for Texans fans, is we were up 17 and we didn't use our best guns to get this thing done. We're out here targeting Chris Conley as damn near as many times as Nico Collins is. Can that experiment be done? And he's dropping the ball. Like, we're not in, like, you know, it was just frustrating at the end because it seemed like Rex Burkhead was getting the lion's share of the touches over Cooks, Collins, and Pierce. And that's what you thought it was going to be this year. And never did you think, with a game on the line like this, with your chance to get an upset like this, that it would be Rex Burkhead who it appears you're trying to get the ball to. Just that's just frustrating.
Yeah, and I think the distribution of the ball, particularly in the passing game, like you said there, Ron, was really poor. I think to have Nico, who you really need to kind of break out this year and be a reliable target, only targeted 3 times. You saw the Colts utilise it. Pretty much everybody on the active roster had a target pretty much for the Colts on the other side. A bit more, you know, and I think the play calling, as you said, became predictable. They ran that angle route late on. I think it was in overtime in the fourth quarter. I can't remember, to Burkhead again. Burkhead had more passing targets than all the wide receivers pretty much combined. Obviously, Brandon Cooks led the way. And I think, you know, when you compound the issues that we had last year, when you've got to have a new scheme, when you've still got the same fundamental issues of not being able to run the ball and overfeeding Brandon Cooks, and, you know, 50+% of your targets are going through him, an uneven, unhealthy distribution of the ball, then teams are going to get wise to that pretty quick. So I don't know quite how Pep fixes it, but certainly what we saw earlier in the game needs to be more of that kind of stuff than what he digressed to late on. And it felt like he closed up a bit and just didn't use the full playbook when, you know, this season is a free hit in many ways. There's no downside to being creative and going for it and being unorthodox at times. There is no downside in this season's context, I think.
Man, didn't it feel a lot like last year, like you've seen before? You know, like Tim Kelly would have some creative shots, some creative things he may do at certain points of the game, early in games. But then when you get done, you look at it and it's like Brandon Cooks has 15 targets and nobody else is trusted, or at least Davis Mills doesn't trust anybody else to go to. And you're running the football with like, you're like, how is David Johnson getting more carries than anybody else? You know, why in the world is he getting more carries than everybody else? Like, at the point last year, there were moments you're like, Rex Burkhead, should be getting more carries.
Yeah.
And it was still David Johnson and Philip Lindsay getting more carries. It's happening again right now. At the end of the game, you look at it, and I think, you know, Cooks has like 12 targets in the game, and Nico has 3, and Brevin probably has 1 or 2. And I mean, hell, Conley's up there with 2. And then next thing you know, Rex Burkhead, even though Damian Pierce has been showing you, he's over there with all the carries. And it's a lot like what we saw from Tim Kelly, which we were all hoping would be different.
Yeah, and there was too many times as well, I think, yesterday when, as I said, the play was set up, but you just didn't have the execution of the tailback when you've got a guy on the sidelines that can do that. Big frustration, I think. And I suppose the overall kind of play calling, I think, was good. I mean, it comes to the point where you'd almost see Jeff Driscoll run it more than some of these guys at the back there.
My goodness.
And he came on and he was successful both times. He converted both times he was on the field. So that was a nice wrinkle to see. But I think, you know, and O.J. Howard was a pleasant surprise. It just shows you where we've been with that tight end room, that he kind of comes in within a week and gets some, you know, and gets a lot, you know, gets some reasonable packages. But I think, Ron, I think the big point that we need to take away from, to not put up a point in the final over 27 minutes of football, to not be able to put a single point up there, get the ball back 4 or 5 times, stall out. Mills is sailing air balls into the air. He dropped one out of bounds to Brandon Cooks on a 3rd and 3 late in the fourth quarter when there was 2 guys wide, both tight ends. Brown was on the sideline lined up against a corner that he can take on at the sticks if he meets him. And O.J. Howard came on a sort of comeback route, wide open, hands out, and the linebacker or safety, I can't remember which one it was nowhere near him. You know, and I'm not saying it's all on Mills, and I think we've touched on some points there, but 27 minutes of football, not be able to put a point up, you're not going to win many games playing football like that.
And the part about it that's frustrating is it felt like they were, not that they weren't trying to score, but they weren't certainly giving everything they could to say, let's go punish this and end the game. Right. The last 27 minutes, they were so conservative. They were playing to just run the clock out instead of playing to to score. I do want to bring up a point as we're talking about the offense that you made there. I do think it's something we potentially should look at from a positive point. Like the tight end situation may be maybe the best place for them to explore matchups and to be able to get some good stuff there. What we saw from OJ Howard, and like OJ Howard showed separation, whether it was schemed for him or like the example of the play you just spoke about. Pharaoh Brown, I felt like on his one target showed in his catch showed some wiggle and got a big play out of it. And I don't know, Brevin Jordan, I was really excited about walking into the year. Still haven't seen very much there from what we thought we were going to see. Thought he was going to be heavily involved from what we watched in training camp, but he really hasn't, including yesterday. Those three, though, that may be, it seems like Mills is comfortable in the middle of the field. Those may be opportunities the rest of the way for them to get some. So I think coming out of the game offensively, especially in that fourth quarter and overtime, that one's tough to swallow. But at least out of that, the tight end situation, that looks like that's a place where they may have some advantage.
Yeah, no, I think it's a decent mix. I thought Brown had a good catch. He probably just didn't get them involved enough. And I know they picked...
Just not enough.
Yeah. And they picked that up on the broadcast. I mean, I'm not seeing the final percentages in terms of formations, in terms of snaps, but 12 personnel they picked up on the broadcast was a huge amount of what they rolled out. And we expected that from Pep. But I think when you look at... and obviously the fumble in the fourth quarter changed that, and that was the big momentum swing. I think that was the play that you would point to. But... the possession prior to that is where they don't go for the field goal, and it's the 4th and 2 at the third quarter. And if you kick that, then regardless of what the Colts subsequently did, you're still 3 points ahead. And I think that's the issue. I think so. Lovey, and I think the comments from Lovey, I don't think necessarily instills much quality or a perception that he believes in his players, because effectively by not kicking it there when it's in a proven range of kicking for Kaimi Fairbairn, who's on a good salary in terms of kickers, you said you don't trust your kickers there. It's at some points in the second half you say you didn't trust your offense, and then it was subsequently you've also said at that point or a different point what led to you being conservative again. You didn't trust the defense because the offense couldn't stay on the field long enough. The defense was gassed, so he's not really given a vote of confidence to anybody, and that might be an indirect admission of the caliber of players and the quality we've got in this roster, which everybody's kind of aware of. But I think to not have any identity or even try and forge one and go after that to try and win games is perhaps a concern as well.
Oh, see, I disagree. I think he has an identity. I just think he showed it. I'm telling you right now. I think if that was Mahomes, I think he's punting it or not. Like, I just think that's him, because at the time, what is it? We were sitting at 21-3, right? And he's like, yeah, you know what? Or is it 21-10 by that point? Or 20-10. At that point, man, I got a double-digit lead in the fourth quarter. Oh man, let me pin him back. I like the way my defense is playing. Let me pin him back. Like most people at that place on the field would either kick it if they're conservative, or go for it, which I think most teams would do. 4th and 2, I feel good. I can do a whole lot of stuff. They got to be covering a bunch. I can run. I can throw the ball. There's a lot of matchups of things that I can do. But he's ultra conservative, and he don't want to kick it or go for it, and he wants to punt it and pin him back. So I'm telling you, man, I don't care who the quarterback is or what the offense. I don't even know if it's a level of trust. I think he just trusts his belief in what his human nature is, and that is ultra conservative.
And what did you make of the big kind of swing play? I think with Tunsil, obviously, he basically shut it down after 5 weeks with a minor hand injury. They sort of had a clear the air talks. He kind of comes back. He's on a huge, almost untradeable contract for next year and this year. And he lets you down in a big spot. And I don't think he was totally at fault, because if you see before the ball snapped, and actually they ran that same pressure earlier in the game, which actually Damian Pierce, oddly enough, picked up as the blitzer or as the final kind of blocker. So they'd already run that pressure. Pierce isn't on the field at this point, kind of going back to a similar theme. Tunsil points him out. Green's a bit narrow. He's too inverted closer into the centre. Then Tunsil has got a decision to make. He then goes in. I think he underestimates how quick the guy's speed 45 in the linebacker position comes out, gets a free hit, ball pops out, Buckner lands on it. And I do think everybody will point to Tunsil, and I think ultimately it was his fault because he should have drifted out to the side. And I know everybody, the rule of thumb is you block inside out, so therefore I think he's thinking he can go and help the rookie out, give him a bit of a chip, and then go back out and get the guy. But the guy's too quick for him. And at that point, you just felt the momentum. You could feel it on the broadcast. The energy kind of sapped out the game, and it felt like there was only going to be one winner if it hadn't have been for Blankenship missing pretty much a chip field goal at this level. So, what did you make of that play? And I think, what do you think of Tunsil and his future? Because I think if he was on any other team, he might not be here right now. I think he's only here because we're in a luxury position of we don't have to pay a quarterback, etc. And I think from a guy who you're probably going to rely on to let you down in a big moment like that, I don't know how well that bodes. But again, didn't play any preseason, so maybe rust.
Yeah, I think there was a lot there. One, Britt is out of the game, so McCray has to move over to play center, and now Kenyon Green comes in. You don't know how – it looked like it was a communication thing, which happens a lot. It was just a really, really bad time for it to happen. And, the thought is, as you said, let me get a touch on the closest potential danger to the quarterback. And so he's going inside first and never gets out, gets back out there to him. And it was a deep blitz where he came from. So there was still a couple of seconds. And I think the big thing is just communication, lack of time between him and Green playing together. I think came a lot of what happened there, but it was obviously the turning point in the game. It is what wrecked the plan of what Lovey had. Let's just run as much clock as we can, and let's just play good defense, and they'll run out of time. They needed the help, and that was the play that gave them the help, the turnover. Then it had to drive the length of the field, and they could run their whole offense. So yes, but I think the larger point is if you play with that's your game plan. That's how you want to attack it. That conservative nature, and just say, hey, let's just play not to lose instead of going to win. You leave yourself less rope, right? Instead of going to win and playing of let's not lose, you leave yourself less rope to where all of a sudden, one bad thing occurs, and then it throws a wrench in it. So I just think, if they've been playing aggressive the whole way through the fourth quarter and didn't just kind of shut it down, I don't know if they would be in that place. They may have more points on the board to where that sack fumble, which is going to happen at times, doesn't hurt them as much. So I think the overall point was, one, that was, I think, some miscommunication between guys who had played a lot with each other. And second, when you put yourself in a position of the tightrope, one bad thing happens, then, it makes it easier for a team to come back and get you.
Yeah, and I think after that point as well, the pass protection has been pretty good till that point throughout the day. I think Mills started to look a bit more frantic shaky in the pocket. I think you left Pharaoh Brown out on Quitty Payne. He gets a sack late on in the game, and it just kind of continued. It almost kind of culminated in things starting to go wrong, not having that mental strength, just feeling the momentum swing the other way. And I think for me, centre or the interior of the line is a problem. I think Justin Britt looks slow when he gets out in the space. There was at least 2 blocks that he could have made, one for Rex Burkhead and one for Damian Pierce really early in the game. I think it was on the second drive. If he just makes the block against Okereke, Pierce is probably taking it to the house, and that happened too many times. And then again,
he's just not good anymore.
No, that's it. Yeah, he's done.
It's just flat out, man. He's just not good anymore.
Yeah, and it was him locked eyes, expecting the linebacker to come in. Grover Stewart then blows up the play, the third down call where they run Rex Burke. I think it was a 3rd and 3 in overtime. And that was all she wrote, and then they punted. So I think the offense wasn't a great day. Kenyon Green, I think, did okay. Ron, did you pick up much? I didn't see any. There was no flashes anyway, certainly.
No, I mean, not as much. I mean, I'm ready to see him. I'm ready to see him. Hell, I'll be honest with you. I've been mulling this over. Like they can put Justin McCray at center. Like I'm just really like, game on the line. I mean, he just got his ass kicked so much. I mean, we'll talk about the punt, right? Now I don't love the play call. Hey, 3rd down and 1, game on the line. I'm gonna give it to Rex Burkhead. But I mean, 90 didn't just have to kick your ass that quickly and that easily from the center position from Justin Britt to make that a 1-2 yard loss. I'm overseeing him. It's not just injuries. He's just not good. My eyes told me last year that he was far too often in the backfield, 3 steps off snaps. And I thought, well, maybe that was, that whole offense that Bill O'Brien and Tim Kelly run where there's so much thinking no, man, he was living in the backfield again. I mean, he's just done to me.
Yeah. And there was that disastrous series before they punted the ball back, before Blankenship missed it in overtime, and 3 of the 5 guys false started. They called it on Titus Howard, but 3 of them jumped offside. And again, that was, I assume, from the center's communication and the snap.
Well, he also had a false start where he just moved. He just moved his leg and didn't snap. And so it was, I'm over him.
Yeah, and I think, we've got Quesenberry there on the, why just give him a go, I think, and see what you've got there. I think, and I remember him playing for the Chargers last year, and I'm sure Malik Collins had a couple on him, so he's not excellent by any stretch, but yeah, you think at this stage, but I think if history's taught us anything, Justin Britt will get injured at some point, Ron, I think, and it won't be a discussion point, so you don't wish ill health on anybody, but I think, I think that the Texans are doing their young quarterback a disservice, but when you take the whole complexion or the whole sort of body of work from Mills, what's your latest view? When still a small sample size to this date, but add this game in, what does it change? Where are you at?
Nothing. I'm not mad at Davis Mills. I know as I saw Texans Twitter and I talked to people after the game, they're mad. I'm not mad at Davis Mills. If you know me, I've said this since the year ended. I've seen enough. I know what Davis Mills is. I know it was just 11 games last year. I've seen that. Davis Mills is not good enough to get you through the quarterbacks and the teams in the AFC that you're going to have to go through over the next decade. You watched Josh Allen on Thursday night. Come on. You watched Patrick Mahomes yesterday. Come on. You watched Justin Herbert. Come on. Deshaun hasn't played, but you've watched Deshaun Watson for the first, years of his career. You know where he is. You watch Joe Burrow. Like, even playing bad, he brought his team back and they should have won. You see Lamar Jackson yesterday. All of those guys are under 27. Yeah. All of them.
Yeah.
And Davis Mills isn't running through those guys. I'm not upset what I saw. Davis Mills is exactly what I saw. He is all right. And yesterday he was inconsistent, like he's going to be. Yesterday he made some good – you got to scheme it like hell with him to make plays. And then the biggest point, when it comes down to it, he had 4 drives in the fourth quarter and overtime with his team to either put the game away or win it. 4 drives, 0 for 4. Didn't even – and I mean, when I say put away, he just got to get in field goal range. He just got to get in field goal range to put points on the board or field goal range to go ahead. 4 drives. He almost threw a pick that really ended it to Stephon Gilmore. Yeah. I don't know who the hell he was throwing that to. You said he sailed the ball over. And when I say this, I'm not even going to talk about Mahomes or Allen or none of those guys. Yesterday, Baker Mayfield trailed in the fourth quarter. But he scored 3 times with his team, brought him back in the fourth quarter. You know what else happened? They lost. Why? Because Jacoby Brissett was able to drive it down and put his team in position to kick a field goal to win the game. Mitch Trubisky twice yesterday drove his team down in position to kick field goals to win games, and eventually they won the game. Like, those aren't the great quarterbacks, but those 3 did it. Yeah. Hell, Carson Wentz did it twice yesterday in the fourth quarter for Washington with his team trailing. Had to have it drives. He had 4 of them to just get field goals, and he couldn't get his team in field goal range. Now, is it all his fault? No, but those guys make plays. 4 drives. Like, I'm not upset because Davis Mills has an obvious limit. It is a reason why he was the 8th drafted quarterback in his draft class. And I mean, it's just, so I'm not upset. He did exactly what I thought he would do.
Yeah, it was that play, the Stephon Gilmore one you touched on there. I don't know who he was throwing to, if somebody ran the wrong route.
Looked like he was throwing it to Gilmore. That's what it looked like.
Oh, yeah. So it was in between Chris Moore and Brandon Cooks. And when you get the ball back, fourth quarter, minute 54 on the clock, 3 timeouts.
You got a moment right here. Here you go.
Yeah. And that's the moments, I think, where even if you're the biggest Mills, whatever you want to call it, I hate these phrases that people use on so yeah,
I call them Mills truth.
Yeah, stuff like that. If you want to be sort of non-objective and almost, tribal in your thoughts because you want it to succeed, and we all do. But I think when you see a moment like that, and that was one of 4, as you said, there's only so many times you can try and give them the benefit of doubt and say, maybe this kid, he's got a future in the league. I don't think anybody's doubting that. But as you said, within the context of this AFC, we need a flat-out baller. If you're going to be, even if you have one, you're still not guaranteed success in the AFC now. And look, I'm not saying he won't just take a Josh Allen jump and it may all click. And if he could become, incredibly consistent and not sail those balls and make those throws, then fine. And look, and it's easy to say, he shouldn't be throwing the ball. I think it was 37 attempts or whatever he had. Too many. He's not got the arm for it. And that's why I think you start seeing them sailing, partly because they're not running the ball so well. But I thought in a game where it was handed to you on a plate multiple times, you didn't take it. It wasn't like you had to go and fight for it and win it out of the jaws of defeat. It was literally handed on a plate to the team, and they didn't take it. Regardless of the talent around them, regardless of the new scheme, play call, and all the kind of mitigating factors you want to make, it just wasn't there. The clutch factor that you need for a guy who you can put, and we had one, and that's the worst bit about it at times. But you had, that sort of, you'd put your mortgage on him scoring at times because he's going to go and do it. And I just, at no point did I feel confident. It just felt like the offense's belief had drained, and perhaps some of his own belief as well.
I'll tell you right now, like, you didn't think about it, but then when you look out there at it, like he had at least as much talent as Matt Ryan did out there. I mean, Matt Ryan is a shell of his MVP self. He can't move. Where he's going to be, right? Jerry Hughes was killing that right tackle, Braden Smith, all game long. I mean, he was getting pressure. He's throwing to no names outside of Pittman. I mean, who are these guys? How many times in the fourth quarter did he get his team down there, either scores or in position to get? I mean, he did it over there, and he's not anywhere near where he is. He's not an elite quarterback. It's just, I mean, you got to take it for what it is. And if they are in the business of, hey, he is our quarterback right now until we are finding the guy we need to be our franchise guy, then I'm fine with it. All right, just sit there. But if they're in the deal of, hey, man, we're going to see what Davis is like, what are you talking about? Like, you can't watch these games of these other teams of players and quarterbacks in this conference that are young, that aren't going anywhere. And they're not just coming by themselves. They got teams with them, right? They got other Hall of Fame caliber players with them, all pro caliber players with them. You can't sit here and say, man, I'm going to run with, like, this Mills thing is something to really look at. Just, I mean, you got to stop this.
Yeah. No, I think we'll have constant reminders, and I think he's got a full another 16 games after this week to go, and starting with Denver next week, which is going to be a tough place for him to go against a really good defense.
I forgot about him. Yeah. Russell, he's in Denver. Yeah, I mean, they're quarterback.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think you saw that yesterday with the way Justin Herbert brought them back in LA as well. I think it's the competition is far few. If this was the NFC, you could maybe say, yeah, build a team around it might give you some form of chance. But again, you'd still be limited, I think. So, yeah, it was a reminder if you needed one, or you perhaps just didn't want to concede the point.
To yourself.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something. But what did you make of the defense? I've had kind of concerns about Lovie calling the plays and trying to manage the game. He obviously didn't manage the game well, but I thought overall, probably the highlight, obviously filling the stat column, Jerry Hughes gets an interception and a strip sack. What did you think of the defense overall, Ron?
I like the defense. I like it a lot. I think what the offense at least did this year is they sustained some semblance of drives to where the defense, which I thought played well early in games a lot last year, just wore down because they were on the field so much. 20 points. 20 points to a team. You get multiple turnovers, and I think that's good. You got turnovers. You stop them on fourth down, which is basically like a turnover. I think the defense really. Jerry Hughes was great. I'd like to see. I thought Jonathan Grenard. You see a little bit more from him rushing the passer. We'll see there Malik Collins, but they are a solid group. I just disagree with some of the personnel packages. Like, it was clear, like they were trying to get running backs, especially Hines, on Grugier Hill, lining him up one-on-one, and they just exploited that matchup. I thought maybe bringing a safety in there, because at that point, Jonathan Taylor was running all over you anyhow. But that matchup was just easy for him on third downs, or they needed to get plays. That would be only it. But, man, you came in here and said, hey, man, this defense is going to get turnovers and pressure and, allow 20 points, in an overtime as well. I would, in 5 quarters, I would take that every time. In today's,
and it should be enough. Yeah, not only conceding 20 points, as you said, 5 quarters should be enough to see you through. I think partly, and you saw it, and I put a clip out, or just a still image of this on Twitter today. I think when the Texans go to their second string front four, I think that's a bit of a concern, because it was like bowling balls, pins flying around at times in those white jerseys,
Especially with the injuries, right? We'll see if Green and Addison are there. I feel like that would be better. But yeah, they were. There was a clear drop off. Hopefully, if they get healthy, they get those guys back in. It'll be better.
Yeah, because I think Mario Addison's potentially, and you probably can verify this at training camp, Ron, but it's potentially, certainly from reading the reports, is potentially their best just flat out rusher at times. And Tunsil touched upon that. Going against them was probably the hardest one he had in training camp. And then, and Rashid Green, I think, is good because he gives you that inside-outside versatility that you can mix up the looks at times. You've brought, Tony Harris up. I don't think he did a huge amount. And I think Heinisch and Domafor kind of got pushed around a lot. And look, it's a good Colts line. But yeah, like you said, I think they just pushed them around too much. And Grenard, okay, got 2 TFLs, particularly, that one on the Wildcat where they ran Hines. But I think when he's going against a guy, Matt Pryor, who most people, your average fan, will not have heard of, to not get enough pressures when Jerry Hughes is lined up on the other side is probably something to know. And I think 45 Oronko was a liability, and they went after him. And then
you couldn't play him.
Yeah, and they had to pull him, and they hit him after that.
Yeah, I was surprised. I thought the Texans, if they could find a way to get the game into a space where the Colts had to pass, and the Texans knew they had to pass, and they could just pin their ears back. I thought and they got good pressure, right? They're nitpicking, but I just, I thought you might see when it was 20-17 or 20-3. I'm like, oh boy, like they got to pass. They know they got to pass, and they're going to have problems. I thought Pryor was going to have a lot of problems, and they were already having problems with Jerry Hughes. So that was a tad disappointing, but like I said, nitpicking. I think the defense was really, really good yesterday.
What did you think of the 2 rookies? First of Petrie, I think, gave a 15-yard penalty away, led with his helmet. He missed what should have been an interception and would have got you the ball right down there late in the game. He missed some tackles as well. He flies around, and I think he's going to be a hell of a player. But I think he looked a little bit raw yesterday, and he kind of showed up a bit. And when he could have so easily, and he had another interception where he got caught underneath the ball, or a near interception. I think he just got his hand on it. It was a reception to Pittman on the outside. But I was hoping for more, I think, from Petrie.
Yeah, I think from the context of a rookie playing his first game, him and Stingley, I was pretty good with it. Like they didn't seem overwhelmed. And they didn't seem like they didn't fit in. I mean, they were like, there's some stuff that it makes sense as a rookie, read stuff that they'll get better. but like they were flying around, right? And they were, especially Petrie, they were flying around, and Stingley had a couple of a really nice pass breakup in the end zone there at one point to stop a touchdown. So for those two guys, I think those are guys that people are really excited about. Weren't perfect. There's some improvements there, but I think the overall thing I took from both of them is they didn't look overwhelmed. They looked like, for the most part, they belonged out there. Like some points, like, we talked about it earlier with Green and that miscommunication there. There's some points where you're like, okay, maybe he, he still needed to stop. Those guys seemed like they were ready, and fit in at least.
Yeah, and I think that pass breakup in the end zone where the Texans eventually turned it over, that was one where they kicked the field goal. But yeah, that transitional quickness to make up the ground, to break on the ball and bat it down like that, I think that was a rare flash, I think. And, you want to see that because taking a corner back that high is is unprecedented in many senses. It's set kind of records for
especially in Lovey's defense that we've noticed. It's more zone and more, I'd rather hit. He's more Rondé Barber type of style than a shutdown corner type.
Yeah, but to see that, I think Ron was excellent to know it's there. And I think, and they didn't go after him much. I think they went after Steven Nelson a lot, who held up admirably all day. I think he had 3 pass breakups in the game. I was a little bit skeptical, and I know you would have seen him in your time in Kansas City and stuff like that. He was a bit of a flag machine at times. Was certainly my interpretation or impression of him. But I thought he had a good game too.
Yeah, he was solid. Yep. Yeah, he's a guy that we used to call him Handsy Steve. But no, he cleaned it up, had a couple of good pass breakups and did well. I mean, that's a receiving core that the Texans, even though they're young, that's a receiving core the Texans should be able to handle.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's they'll see some different ones. Like we watched Miami yesterday. That's gonna be a tall task. They play the Chiefs. That's gonna be a tall task. They play the Chargers. They play the Raiders. They've got some teams. That's one they should handle, and I think they handled pretty well for the most part.
Yeah. What was your biggest surprise of the day, Ron? Is anything that you just didn't see coming from all those days of training camp out there? Was there anything that took you back?
We've hit on it a little bit. The dominance of Jerry Hughes caught me off guard. The quickness, the speed, the pace, the ability of everything. Like he impacted the game, forced fumble, interception, multiple sacks, causing penalties from Braden Smith to move early because he was coming. I thought he would be a good addition. Like they've got a lot of these guys. They've got a lot of real leadership culture guys that aren't real productive, like Rex, Chris Conley, Justin Britt, we've touched on. He's a real culture guy, but he appears to be a guy that's going to be productive too. And he's in his mid-30s, to see the get off that he still has, that was still surprising to me in a game that Jerry Hughes at one point just single-handedly dominated. I mean, he took them out of field goal range on a drive by himself with a sack and then causing Braden Smith to jump because he was trying to get out early. Just pushed him out of field goal range. So, that was my biggest surprise, how dominant he was at that time.
Yeah, I think for me it was actually Jonathan Owens in terms of how well he tackled. Yeah. I don't think you don't want him as a starting safety. I don't think at this point in his career he may be a bit of a late bloomer, but I was reasonably impressed with him. I thought he looked solid. You were sure in the tackle. Read his keys well, and I thought, for all the hype he gets about for his other half being a former Olympic athlete, I think it was good to see him kind of stand up on his own light. And the safety position was my big concern coming into the season, but it didn't look, or it certainly didn't cost them the game yesterday. That wasn't the reason why they tied it, which is an odd thing to say, but but here we are talking about it. But what was the biggest disappointment of the day, do you think, Ron?
There were a few, but I'll go here. The inability to not get Nico Collins involved. We started to see late, the last couple of preseason games and in practice, using his body and his speed in a way we hadn't seen him do it yet. And he caused penalties against the Niners, 2 of them. in that preseason game, and then start going up and just using his body and making catches. Like it looked like, okay, he's ready to be a guy on the other side of Cooks that they can use, big body boundary type receiver. And they just didn't get it. It didn't seem like it was a priority to get there. And I don't know whose fault that was. That it's Pep or Davis, but that was really disappointing that, Nico Collins and Chris Conley had about the same amount of targets, and they didn't find a way to get him more involved in this game.
Yeah, I think for me it was the offensive play calling. I think it just wasn't varied enough, and I think it really held the team back. In particularly late on, I think as we touched upon, to get the ball that many times and not do anything with it of note, and not trust your kicker and all this kind of stuff. Just wasn't good. But I think, Ron, my overall reflection from the game, I think, is this is a much more physical, apart from linebacker, I think we still need to improve on that position. I hope Christian Harris comes back in and gives him a bit of zip, because in the past coverage, just as you said, Grugier Hill liability. Kirksey's only good going downhill, and I know Kevin Pierre-Lewis had a tip ball and stuff and things, but yeah, we just got caught out on that, and those intermediate areas. That was where when they had to find yards, that was where they got it. And I think the linebacker spot needs to be upgraded. I'd put that up the top, top few needs. Obviously, you want to get some edge rushers in the building, but I think this team overall is much more physical, much more. Penalties were okay, but it's a much more disciplined, much more physical football team, and I think it was certainly a hell of a lot easier to watch than it was at times last year.
Yeah, for me, there are a lot of good things we saw yesterday to build a 20-3 lead, to be able to let a team make mistakes and capitalize at times on them. But I think the number one thing overall, what you can't come away without learning is, like, this is a team that is better than it was last year, better coached than it was last year. But they came off yesterday with decisions they made of, we're okay with just being okay. Like we're okay with being all right. And when you make the decision for the tie, you make the decisions that you made in the fourth quarter, just trying to hold on. Like that's not a killer instinct. That's not a let me dare to be great. We're just okay with being okay. And I, as a fan, that would be a real difficult thing for me. But
yeah,
that's one of the things I took away from yesterday.
Yeah, I think you could. I mean, there is a potential scenario where if you've got a grossly talented team with big difference makers, none of which we have. Then you can afford to sort of lean into that sphere of coaching and philosophy, but you can't do it with this team. And I think when if there's any time to throw caution at the wind, if there's anything to try things, if on special teams or trick plays or whatever it might be, just do it. Give the fans something to look after, I think, and root for, because at times it was good, but the defense faded. Partly legs, partly the offense not being on the field, but it just felt like you could have just thrown caution at the wind a little bit more and just gone for it. But here we are, the first ever tie in Texans history. The Browns won. Obviously, that's something we're going to keep an eye on for most of the season. They kicked, obviously, York, who they drafted in the fourth round, last-minute field goal. But actually, I think what swung the game, or what was the difference between the two teams ultimately, was the ability to just run the ball down Carolina, and the 27 seconds left on the clock, they managed to go right up the field at the end of the first half and score a field goal there as well. And I think just that ability to run the ball is going to see the Browns okay, despite having Watson out for this amount of games until he visits NRG. But certainly I think that's not necessarily going to be a very high draft pick unless there's injuries, certainly based on yesterday. Because Carolina, we saw them last year, not the worst defense by any stretch of the imagination. Lost a couple of guys, but I think the Browns are going to be able to ride on running the ball and playing smart, safe football.
They may be able to win some games, as you said, talking about the Texans. They do have some difference makers that can help with that. Myles Garrett can pop up and make a play, and they've got good guys in the secondary as well. And then Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, as we saw yesterday, can just go, make plays behind that offensive line. But damn, boy, if you're a Texans fan, that was one you wanted to get.
Yeah.
If you're hoping that draft pick is as high as it can be.
Yeah, and when Baker ran into the end zone and he just about took the cameraman out. Yeah, he just about took the cameraman out there with the throwing the ball off the boards. But it was one you potentially expect, but it's a really easy schedule for them, to be honest, in the first
right up
5
the bat,
weeks. Yeah, so I think I can see them winning at least 4 games quite comfortably. So we'll keep an eye on that as it goes through the season. In the AFC South, we are a joint top of the AFC South. Both the Jags, you touched on it earlier in terms of Wentz ripped them up. So maybe the Jags aren't going to bounce back as much as some may have predicted. And the Titans laid an egg with a 2-point conversion late on Daniel Jones, brings them roaring back. Relatively speaking, but I think both games, Ron, showed us the division is potentially there for more wins. Just by both the teams are, particularly the Titans, have regressed.
This is one where you don't want to look in the rearview mirror, but good God Almighty, what this could be if everything that didn't happen the last 2 years, if you had the quarterback that you thought you were going to be having. I mean, the Texans would dominate this division. I mean, the Titans, they lose to the Giants, but that's not going to be the last bad loss. I mean, they laid it. I mean, they are just a different team. They're not as talented at all. We saw what A.J. Brown did in Philadelphia yesterday, and they're just losing that guy and trying to replace him with a rookie who has asthma problems. Like this is a different group. And like, to me, I still would say the same after the game. I'm not impressed at all by the Colts. But if the Colts just play games and don't make, as many mistakes and errors, they'll probably win this division. And they're not. When you put them on par with the other top teams in the AFC, they're not even close. But they should win. These games. They didn't win yesterday because they just tried not to. And I don't think they'll do that. I don't think they'll make those many mistakes the rest of the way, especially within this division. But it is not impressive at all. And it brings even more because the Colts just seem like they're in refusal of ever getting a quarterback for the future. That the Texans, they can get back into this thing quickly because they're not in the AFC West or the North. Like, they can get back in it. Nobody has with the exception of Lawrence, nobody has a long-term quarterback. And they make the right moves here coming up. They can get back in it quicker. Than maybe what you'd have thought.
Yeah, it's definitely there for the taking. I think that's perhaps some of the solace you can take in difficult results yet, like yesterday, to see a future. And I think 2024, I think a huge amount is possible, but it's going to be a bit of a grind, I think, to get through these next years. In particular, it's clear this salary cap situ, because next year they're not going to have much money to spend either. But I think Denver road trip. I've witnessed it myself in person. The altitude makes a difference. It's not an easy place to go. They've got a good record despite being in quarterback purgatory pretty much since Peyton Manning left and won them to the Super Bowl under Gary Kubiak. They bring in Russell Wilson, perhaps the most cringeworthy sportsman in America at times, I think. I struggle with him. I saw Mitchell Schwartz tweet about him being a method actor, and it's hilarious for the rest of us as we watch him on as he was fake high-fiving.
He lacks a little genuine.
Yeah, I think that's safe to say. But what's your expectations next week going up to Denver? Obviously, they play tonight. We've not seen them yet as we're recording. But what do you think? Is there any chance to get a result there? Because on paper, it would seem a mismatch.
Yeah, on paper, it would be. We'll have to see how they look. They're going to be a problem. I mean, we saw it get away from them in the second half with Jonathan Taylor in the run game. I'll tell you, Javonte Williams, maybe a lot of people don't know about him yet, but he is a load. And they're probably going to use him a lot. And obviously they've got weapons on the edge as well with Russ, and their defense is really good too. So that's one you don't love the chances there. And it's going to be a crazy atmosphere for Davis Mills as Mile High usually is. So that's an uphill battle, to say that nicely.
Yeah.
That's an uphill battle.
Yeah, and that was where the name of the podcast came from, Ron, was the last trip to Denver. The spiral fumble from Brock Osweiler. And I remember getting the flight home thinking, why did I do this to myself? And it was a turn up for what kind of moment, or why did I do this? What am I turning up for? And despite tweets and messages on Reddit about changing the name, we've got no plans of changing it. It's a question with a synonymous player spelling. But hopefully it's not another moment like that this week when the Texans fans are making the trip back. But first home game of the season, new quarterback, new ownership. It looks like the odds are stacked against it, but we will see. We'll be back again next week to talk about that. Please share the podcast, like us, subscribe on YouTube, share it with another Texans fan if you can. Tweet it out, retweet it, give us some support. Be much appreciated of that. And thank you to Ron for his time. Ron, it's been a pleasure. We'll definitely have to do this again sometime.
Yes, sir, man. It was a good time, man. It was fun.
Thanks to Ron, and thanks to everybody for listening, and we'll be back next week to review the game in Denver.